The Indiana Fever finally decided to part ways with their head coach, Christie, marking a pivotal moment for the team and setting the stage for new opportunities. This decision came after a series of disappointing seasons and culminates in what many fans see as the overdue dismissal of a coach whose strategies and leadership failed to rejuvenate a struggling franchise. For the Fever, this change is massive, but it's even more critical for someone beyond the team, a basketball sensation by the name of Caitlin Clark. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. Christie came into the Fever with a reputation for being a sharp strategist and a no-nonsense leader. She had been expected to revitalize the team and bring them back to their glory days. At least, that was the plan on paper. Sides had a gruff demeanor, and while her straightforwardness initially seemed like the tough love the team needed, it quickly became apparent that something wasn't clicking. If you've ever met someone who insists on going down a one-way street because they're pretty sure the GPS is wrong, you have an idea of Side's coaching philosophy. When she stuck to a plan, she really stuck to it, even when the plan was driving everyone else straight into a ditch. For a team like the Fever, which has been languishing at the bottom of the standings for several seasons, a stubborn approach was the last thing they needed. With losses piling up in the locker room reportedly resembling a silent Thanksgiving dinner after an uncle's political rant, things weren't looking good. But through it all, Sides maintained that she had the right strategy. She saw herself as a builder, trying to create something solid from what looked like a collection of loose parts. Unfortunately, it turned out she was using instruction manuals from entirely different sets. Yet, there's more to this story than Sides' missteps. The shadow of what could come next now looms large, particularly the prospect of Caitlin Clark finding her way into the Fever's future plans. For those who aren't aware, Caitlin Clark is not just another promising player. She's a generational talent. The kind of player who doesn't just change games, she changes franchises. And if you're in the business of coaching such talent, you better have more than just one stubborn roadmap. Clark's presence in women's college basketball has been nothing short of electrifying. She plays with a combination of confidence and flair that makes highlight reels practically write themselves. Some people call it cockiness, but it's hard to argue with someone who backs it up by hitting shots from the parking lot like they've got a permanent green light. Clark's journey to stardom wasn't just about talent. It's about how she embraced challenges with a smile, a wink, and sometimes a step-back three-pointer that leaves defenders wondering where they went wrong in life. As the Fever's front office looks to rebuild their team, one of their key tasks will be attracting top talent like Clark. It's not a stretch to suggest that the firing of Christie is as much about clearing a path for the next star as it is about moving on from past mistakes. Imagine Caitlin Clark watching from afar, seeing the wheels turning in Indiana. The franchise might as well be painting help wanted signs all over the arena in bright neon letters. With Sides out of the picture, the Fever now need a coach who not only understands how to work with a dynamic star, but also knows how to build a culture that can support and elevate players like Clark. That's no small task, but given the urgency of the situation, there's little time for hesitation. The Fever needs someone who can guide their ship without being so set on a single route that they ignore all the signs of trouble. There's a difference between staying the course and heading straight into an iceberg. Sides' departure signifies a shift in priorities to the franchise. They're not just looking for another head coach. They're looking for a leader who can bring together a locker room full of contrasting personalities and skills. They need someone who can manage the expectations that come with having a potential star like Clark, as well as someone who can adapt on the fly. Caitlin Clark's skill set isn't something you mold into a rigid system. It's something you build a system around. This makes the Fever's next coaching decision critical. For a coach to handle Caitlin Clark successfully, they must appreciate that Clark isn't just a great player. She's a force of nature. Coaches can't afford to be rigid or overly controlling. They'll need to recognize when to let Clark be Clark and when to guide her toward being the best version of herself. The right coach will need to walk that fine line between giving Clark the freedom to express herself and ensuring she stays grounded in the fundamentals. This isn't just a pressure cooker situation for Indiana. It's more like a giant stew where each ingredient, coach, management, players, needs to be in the right proportion. Get it wrong, and you got something bland and forgettable. Get it right, and you're serving up something special. This isn't about finding the flashiest name in coaching circles. It's about finding the right person to unlock the team's potential and bring out the best in their future stars. It's not that Sides didn't know what she was doing. She had a strong background and was touted as a tactician. The problem was that her tactics seemed built for another kind of team, a more seasoned, disciplined roster that could execute a rigid game plan. What the Fever needed was flexibility and creativity, and Side's rigidity stifled the team's growth. Players struggled to adapt to her system, and the fans grew restless as the team's struggles persisted. Sometimes she seemed more focused on trying to prove her point than finding a way to win. Now the pressure is on the Indiana front office to find the right replacement. They must be mindful of the qualities that can make or break a young, dynamic roster. They can't afford another coach whose strategy revolves around hammering square pegs into round holes. They need someone who understands the nuances of working with young, talented players like Clark, someone who can balance discipline with creativity. The franchise needs to cultivate an environment where a player of Clark's caliber can thrive. It's not enough to merely draft her. They must give her the tools, the guidance, and the leadership to reach her full potential. The firing of Christie Sides isn't just a step in a new direction. It's a statement that Indiana is ready to change the narrative and build something substantial. Imagine the locker room dynamics if Clark joins this team. She isn't the type to shy away from expressing her opinions. It's not that she's a diva, but when you've got that kind of confidence and talent, you don't sit back and wait for someone to tell you how things should be. Clark needs a coach who can harness that fire without extinguishing it, someone who can channel her energy into something constructive while still letting her play the way that got her there in the first place. Sides, for all her experience, seemed to miss that point. She often talked about sticking to the fundamentals and running plays the right way, but sometimes the right way is about embracing the players you have and letting them shine. Caitlin Clark isn't going to fit neatly into a box, and that's what makes her so special. The challenge for the Fever is finding a coach who isn't afraid of a little mess, who can see the beauty in the chaos of Clark's game and bring it to life on the court. So, where does this leave the Indiana Fever? The team is at a crossroads, and their next moves will define their trajectory for years to come. By firing Sides, they've shown a willingness to let go of the past and look toward a more promising future. But it's not just about cutting ties with a coach. It's about setting the stage for something bigger. They're aiming for a clean slate, a fresh start, one that potentially includes a superstar in the making like Clark. The stakes are high. The Fever have a chance to turn their fortunes around, but only if they make the right choices moving forward. The firing of Christie Sides is the first domino to fall, and it sends a clear message to players, fans, and potential stars like Caitlin Clark. Indiana isn't content with being an afterthought. They're ready to compete, and they're willing to make bold moves to get there. Clark's arrival, if it happens, will undoubtedly bring a new level of excitement to the franchise. But excitement alone isn't enough. The Fever need to build a culture that not only welcomes a player like Clark, but also gives her the support she needs to reach her full potential. That means finding a coach who understands her value and isn't afraid to let her shine. Christie Sides' firing is a big moment for the Fever, but it's also an opportunity for reflection. The franchise has struggled to find its identity in recent years, and this change in leadership signals a desire to find a new direction. It's about creating a winning culture, not just on the court, but in the locker room and throughout the organization.